I'll hold my tongue.
Okay, perfect. Please continue. Yeah.
All right, I will continue. I'm going to back up a little bit. So Stenros and Mantola had said that LARPs were subjective, co-creative, aimed at the first-person audience, ephemeral, and have a loosely defined purpose. Um, so these attributes, from their perspective, make LARPs very, very difficult to document. Part of that's because if you go about it the same way you would like a theater performance or really any kind of presentation, it's not going to feel right. It's not going to look right. It won't get the minutia. You can do an advertisement, uh, but fundamentally, it can't catch the same thing because it is not the same medium. Uh, there's a couple of ways that I address the differences in the media and different ways to think about it, to report it, to talk about it. I've done several papers on presenting the ephemera of art, but kind of the core of it is these ideas, this praxis, poiesis, and aesthesis. So this is my most talky slide. I'm mostly going to let you look at it, but I'll talk it through real quick. These concepts, they were put together, Jagodinski and Wallen, in part of actually a critique of arts-based research, because a lot of arts-based research focused almost exclusively on praxis, on what you planned, on what you did, on your reflection, very much an act of will, an act of thought. And they felt that that left some things out. Not that praxis isn't important, but they wanted to involve other things that invite the unknown, invite the things you didn't anticipate, invite art as a force rather than just something you make. So that brings in poiesis, which they equate to making. It's the visceral act of making. If you think about swinging the hammer when you are forging something or pushing the clay and having it push back against you when you're trying to make ceramics work, it's got a certain amount of unintentionality to it that is built in that you can't really help but encounter. And aesthesis, as opposed to aesthetics, aesthetics is largely a function. Again, it's got elements of praxis, whereas aesthesis is about your senses and how you're engaging with it in a sensorial level throughout time space. It's kind of intimidating. And all these three things together coexist in symbiosis. They can get a little messy because of that, which is, life is messy. LARP is messy. Breaking them down a little bit. Praxis, my big statement here, LARPs are designed. They are not, you can tell I did a designer's product. The designer's product. Boo me. Uh, so there's a tension between what a designer or a group of designers might put down as the theme, the idea, the rules, who a character is, and uncertainty. And that uncertainty comes because that's what LARP is. LARP is defined by its uncertainty, by the way that the players will bring something in you didn't count on. They won't look the way that you thought they might, what have you. Fatland calls this the fog of LARP, and he talks about designers meaning it with different techniques to either kind of integrate these things into the designer's perspective or dissipate them. Although I would actually push more toward seeing them as co-creators. And Pedersen conceives of LARP as an art of experience, which is a term that I love and I use all the time, and it makes me happy. Where the LARP is co-created by artists as participants who collaborate not only on the decision to play together, but on how they will play. Obviously, the designers do some calibration beforehand, but there's always a little bit of a talk, a little bit of negotiation between the players on what's going to be okay. One of my examples here is that's me from the New World Magischola LARP when I was playing Chancellor Contreras. So the thing I've been thinking about recently is how when you're writing a character, I just did a big LARP, blockbuster LARP I was part of, and I was one of the writers and an NPC. And when you write a character, it's kind of like writing a comic book character. You've got this origin story, you've got motivations, you've got whatever they're capable of. But the second the player has it in their hands and they start doing their costuming and their ideas and listening to their playlists, um, you haven't really made a product. What you have there is a character that is a fusion of your different efforts that is canon. That is who that character is. Once it enters play, that's who that character is. And it's also going to encounter people and change, as Sarah could talk about in depth, Sarah Lynn Bowman. But even before the LARP begins, when we're still in the kind of intellectual planning and doing, that person is a co-collaborator in the shape of what the LARP is and what is possible. As Walmsley says, anything could happen. Oasis. So my big statement here, LARPs are embodied experiences, but they are not theater. I have had this grumpy argument many times, and for some people, maybe they are theater, but they aren't for me. Part of that is the purpose. You're not playing it for other people. We talk about the first person perspective a lot. But the goal of playing in a LARP is to play the character in a LARP. It's not to make other people think you're that character or to congratulate you on your portrayal of that character, whatever. It's an embodied experience. I use Levy's kind of definitive terms there, that it's simultaneously medium artwork, that it mirrors social phenomena, and it's experienced to exist and then exists only as memory. Although that last one, I've been troubling a little bit in my own head, to be honest. And I also share a little bit about inter-immersion here. The shared reality of the game is created from the collective experience of immersion shared and strengthened through interaction. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. You can see I've got hashtag feminism up there. That's a collection of LARPs that were all dealing with feminist ideas. One of the games I played from hashtag feminism is one of the reasons I feel strongly that LARP is not theater. Because the character I played in that was so different from my lived experience, so different from anything I could imagine before I played the game, that if the point was for me to play LARP as theater, I did a very bad job. If the point is to confront me with my assumptions and make me rethink things and broaden my experience, it was very successful. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot is the necessity of trust when we play these games. You can see I've got a lovely de Koven quote on the bottom about being safe with each other. The foundational idea in LARP is that I'm going to pretend to be something I'm not. And the other players are going to treat me as if it is true. In exchange, I will do the same for them. In this case, I will be a mad scientist, and these hot glued together boxes will be equipment capable of extremely amazing feats. Even though none of the buttons move, none of the dials move, whatever. We'll pretend for that moment. That is an intense moment. The monsters are coming. You must make the device work. And this can extend to other things. I played in Say a Little Prayer, and for the length of that game, people agreed to treat me like I was beautiful. That is not normally how I think of myself. But for the length of that game, I could. Within that time and in that place, through the power of trust, I can be fundamentally different than I normally think of myself. In exchange, I agree to do the same thing for other people. That's a heck of a thing. Lastly, I've got isthesis. LARPs may end, but they are never over. There's a term we use sometimes in artography, which comes out of Rita Irwin's research, which is always be becoming. So there's been the observation that we're left with memories, stories, photographs, old props, now serving as souvenirs from alternate realities. They've got Stenros, Montolo, and Barabi. Uh, I would call those social objects. They describe experiences from multiple perspectives. And when I've talked about documenting LARPs before, I've largely talked about it through player-created artifacts and the value that they have in trying to convey a story. If you go to a museum about a historical event, if you read just about what, say, generals did in a big war, it doesn't tend to be very interesting until you get the letters that were sent home, until you see the human impact. And it's the same thing I feel with LARP. Engaging with the objects develops relationships that refer specifically to the experience of that constructed game space. It does, but there's a little bit more to it. So you can see I have a quote from a lovely art education person on the bottom. To describe is to begin to know. It's my favorite part of that quote. So in this picture, there is me dressed up as a student who is a fan of a rock group that one of the professors is in, Kay and the Cryptids. And that professor is signing my shirt while I wear it. But that person is Evan Torner. Evan Torner was an extremely valuable mentor to me when I first started working in this world. To have a parallel between the characters affects me emotionally. It affected me then, it affects me now. Seeing the picture now is I'm in a different place than I was then, so is Evan. And we move through time. This LARP is well and truly over, but it's not, because it continues to affect me. I think about the character, I think about the experience. I've still got my various mementos, and they're incorporated into future experiences. The time moves outside of the confines of when we're in character. I am pretty sure I have burned through my time, so thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah. Anyone who's online, please feel very welcome to either like just go into audio and ask a question directly. Also, you can message me or just in the public chat if you have a question. People can read it or I can read it aloud. If you do it via the chat, I will read it aloud for the people in the room. Does anyone have any questions? We have 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes to ask any questions. So I will start off because I have a question, definitely. So I kind of love you have a very beautiful kind of description of the kind of interpersonal, emotional connection point within these LARPs you're talking about. And I was wondering how you see the connection between this and how De Coven talks about the well-played game or this social shared play space of a broader category of games. Yeah, thoughts on LARP.
Yeah, he talks a lot in very broad terms about pushing each other towards excellence. One of the things that he says is that winning isn't the point. And I have, interestingly, encountered LARP scholars who believe that winning very much is the point. Um, Especially when there's some kind of competition in the LARP. If there's, in Hawkins, for instance, there was a video game competition between the characters. And to just fake that competition was not something acceptable to another designer. Whereas to me, I'm like, the emotional space is where I'm happy. And I think that one of the things from looking at De Coven, I think all of his general principles hold still. Golly, I think he wrote that like 40 years ago. Well played game. I'm not sure. Uh, and the ideas still hit. In part, I think because he grounded them in experience. When he describes a thing, he describes things that he either saw or did himself. Um, but also, I think there's a certain amount of negotiation for what is a well-played game that isn't inherent to the rules. So I think Salen and Zimmerman are probably going to be tied into that because DeKoven comes from a very much here's the game has an objective. And Salen and Zimmerman began to break it into the schema of rules play game. Uh, One of the ones I actually think about a lot is well, I normally talk about Candyland because because I described it to someone one time and I was very dismissive of it at first, and then I realized it was the one place where I could play with a 5-year-old and we had the same chance of winning without me just letting them win, although I would anyway. But it's also a thing where we're negotiating different cultures of play, for instance. A lot of people in the United States might not have played the anything but Bofflarp. And to extend past that experience, you always build on what you already have. And to be honest, the workshops are never going to be enough because so much of it is in the live time and so much of it is in trusting the other players. I know a great deal of people who the only reason that they were willing to try a new kind of LARP is because they looked at who else was playing and they knew that there were people that they already had played with and trusted there. Or alternatively, that's why they did not play. So I think the Decoven forms what I would say is the foundation, but it ends up being complicated by other factors.
Cool. Thank you. Um, unless there's another question jumping in. So
I can
yeah,
ask one.
please. Yeah.
So I was struck by the example of you and Evan playing your characters. And one of the things that people are always asking what's different about role-playing games than other kinds of games or theater or whatever. But it strikes me as this dualness of the social and relational aspects is really kind of fascinating and central to the process. What do you think about that based on your work?
Yeah, there's normally the term that I use in my work is double looking, which is something I get from Deleuzian philosophy. Um, but there's also it goes to the concept I began with as a title that I'm not sure if I fully explored, the we contain multitudes. You know, the layers of to use Evan as a it's a shame he's not here. To use Evan as a specific example, you know, I've played with him in many games of different lengths, of different purposes. We intersect professionally. Uh, and I also know that the experience for him that he carried into other games of say the picture I had put up of us, I was the student, but also when I was Chancellor Contreras, he was one of the professors that worked under me. So there was a weird flip-flop there. And then we were also academics pretending to be academics, along with you who are also an academic. And the layered experiences provide that depth of engagement that I'm kind of pointing at the end. They don't cease to be. And then if we were to play, we would be in a sense drawing on them, building on them, looking for what was new. Um, I often engage in LARP as a self-reflective exercise where I use it to understand things about myself that I may not have been honest with myself about, or things that I think are valuable from my perspectives. And one of the things that I am most interested in engaging with right now is not seeing myself as the only artist there. First of all, seeing myself as an artist. I am a formally trained artist. I went to a very old art school, uh, and seeing what I do as an art form, but also seeing everyone who does it with me as bringing such beautiful strokes to the collective work. Um, the way someone stops in a doorway to try and tell me that my character matters in character, or the confrontations. And we engage in things that bookend larps. We engage in the workshops at the beginning and the debrief at the end. In the same way that if I was teaching a lesson, I would bookend it with a pre-assessment and then some kind of reflection. But it's not as if the learning stays confined to the lesson. It's not as if the people you worked with or the things you made stay constrained by the lesson plan. And the existence of a LARP is so much more than the LARP itself.
Great. Thank you so much. That's our time. Thank you, Dr. Cox. And
Thank you.
next up, we're going to have Dr. Johan Kalmenlehto, whenever you're ready.
Yep. Just a sec. Okay, you should be seeing it without my notes.
Yep.
Is it still like that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello, I'm Johan Kalmanlehto, and I'm from Tampere University Game Research Lab, where I work as a postdoctoral research fellow. Now, unfortunately, my schedule wouldn't allow me to be there in person to present, so I have to do this remotely from home so that I can then make it to the next place where I have to be after this. But yeah, in this talk, I will focus on my research on playstyle, or on the concept of playstyle, with which I have been working lately. And this is based on especially on two articles that I have published. These are theoretical articles on the topic, and they both discuss playstyle. The first, published in ACM Games, focuses on personal style and formation of the self. And the second one, in game studies, focuses on style as an aesthetic preference in goal-oriented play, with an analysis of game mechanics of the game signalis, like how game developers can also consider different play styles in design of the game. But these are quite theoretically heavy articles, and now I'm trying to elaborate on those developments in a more simple and condensed manner. But let's see how it goes. But let's start with the concept of style. I often like to start, when talking about style, I like to start with the etymological background. And the term comes from the Latin word stylus, as most probably know, of course. And stylus means a pointed tool that was used for inscribing words into wax tablets. As you can see the instrument here in the picture also. And enjoy, it's the only picture in this presentation, sadly. But the term is, of course, still used in such sense with touch screen pen styluses, for example. But from this practice of inscribing and writing, style became to mean the manner of speaking and writing, also speaking and writing, and as a kind of a rhetorical and a literary style. And from this literary interpretation, the meaning of style has then widened into artistic style in general, and also to a more general way of behaving and personal style, and even to a style of living. So of course, it's a kind of a wide-ranging concept, and also quite slippery one. It's really difficult to really try to define style in any way, because it's used in so many different contexts. But I think the most important thing about style is that it refers not to what is said or done, but how something is said or done. So it's always in some way about the form rather than the content, although this form content is not really good, or not good terms here, but anyway, it's about the how and not the what. Moreover, style can be understood as a nonverbal component of communication. Like sometimes when we say something, the way we say something can convey more meaning than the actual words. For example, saying thank you can be interpreted differently based on the tone it is said, for example. And of course, like in poetry, the way things are said usually has much more weight than the literal meanings of the words. But this can be extended also to other kinds of practical actions, like closing a door. It can be done with different styles, and it's completely different thing to close a door gently and quietly instead of slamming it shut. And this is also not only communication to others, but it is also about how it feels like for us to do this action. Like it affects our mood, for example, how we do these things, everyday things. Now, in this talk, I will focus, of course, on the style of playing games instead of these mundane actions. And by play style, I refer especially to the ways individual players act with game mechanics, especially in digital games, but also in other types of games. It's not limited to the digital playing. So it is the manner of goal-oriented actions that is the kind of the main point that I'm interested in games that have some kind of goal and then rules and with which we must interact and game mechanics and so on. And we interact with those in some way, and that is the style of play that I have been mostly writing about. Now, because I'm interested in style as an aesthetic phenomenon, it's also, and this was actually a thing pointed to me by my reviewers, that it's important to distinguish between artistic style and more general aesthetic style. Now, artistic style generally refers to the style of an artwork, of course. We can recognize the style of the work by looking at it. Artists tend to have distinct styles manifested in those works, and different art movements often also have recognizable styles. We can, of course, see that like styles in modernism are different. Cubist painting has a rather different style than in impressionist painting or something like that, you know. But with play style, I don't refer to this kind of perceptual quality of this kind of work object, but I refer to how players make different practical actions by interacting with the game mechanics. And like through this goal-oriented nature of gameplay, I think playstyle is closer to the styles of practical everyday actions than styles in artistic production, because of course gameplay does not really produce any kind of work. It can, and I'll come to that in a bit. But anyway, I'm mostly interested here in a kind of leisurely, solitary play. Like, of course, it can be also like multiplayer games or something like that, but mostly like I'm interested in the singular experience of the one player who plays a game. And in that regard, when the player then has some kind of goal to pursue in the game, then they have kind of a style in which they pursue that goal. But to consider this kind of playstyle as aesthetic means also that the player then judges whether this playing feels pleasurable. And because aesthetic experience is generally considered as a value judgment in which we perceive some kind of object like as pleasurable or beautiful, or we can use some other terms, of course, but like these are the kind of stable things to say, beautiful and at least, and kind of this kind of sensory pleasure. So then when a player appreciates their play style aesthetically, they perceive their own way of playing as pleasurable or beautiful. And by perception here, I mean like more about all kinds of embodied sensations, not just visual perception, because I think playstyle is mostly manifested to us just in the way we interact, for example, with game controllers or keyboards with our bodies and minds, and not so much. It's not so much about what it looks like on the screen. Okay, and the last part. So playstyles, even though I have argued a lot that playstyle is this kind of inner and embodied sense of the playing being in some way pleasurable. Playstyles can, of course, also be recognizable by looking how different people play games. And we can appreciate the playstyles of others through this, but we cannot really grasp the inner embodied sensation of what it feels like to play in that way. And of course, let's say streamers can have distinct styles, like artists in visual arts can have distinct styles, and we can appreciate those also aesthetically. But this makes, I think, for example, this kind of streams closer to performances and closer to producing art than just enjoying the action by yourself. So then it becomes artistic style rather than this aesthetic play style in which we just appreciate our own playing aesthetically. So instead of what the playing looks like for others, playstyle is defined by the player's own attitude towards their own play. And two players might actually play in an exactly same manner, but the way of playing could be aesthetically valuable only for one of them, because like one might play in this way because it gives them competitive advantage, whereas the other one might disregard this kind of effectiveness and play in such way just because it simply feels good or gracious or smooth or something like that. Pleasurable it's kind of what I have called the beautiful gameplay, that we feel it as beautiful. And so I think this aesthetic value of playing in a certain way, in a certain style, comes down to the kind of attitude of the players themselves. What do they want from their gameplay? Do they want just to win by all means, or do they want to win with style, for example? So instead of aiming only for optimization, I think playstyle can also be aesthetic in the sense that it allows players to experience the game mechanics aesthetically. And forming different styles can also result in a kind of art of playing, a skill of exploring different ways to enjoy the game mechanics. And I don't think this is actually in contradiction with competitive play, because one can, instead of just strive towards winning, also strive towards winning with style. And I would guess that for many players, even professional players, it's also important to enjoy playing, not just win and be successful by any means. And in leisurely play, I think this is even more crucial, of course. We are not playing in any kind of competitive environment. Maybe I'll stop here, I think. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you
very much. We have time for one question or two. I always have a question burning in my heart. Very good. So you spent time definitely discussing kind of styles of plays, kind of the core framing. Reminded me of like how sports scholars sometimes talk about beautiful play acts and things. Just immediately zoning into Jaakko Stenros and the question I can feel him asking in my heart. Do you feel a tension, or does your work deal at all with the concept of aesthetics of game compared to aesthetics of play, where you have the structure having some sort of beautiful intent or logic or interpretive component within the experience, with the play differentiable from the player's component or interaction with it or action from it?
Yeah, like just thinking about the rules and mechanics and not what the game looks like, which is another aesthetic. Yeah, of course, we might like think about aesthetics of rules, for example. And this, of course, like Sicard has also discussed in relation to football and offside rule, that it's beautiful in itself because it allows this kind of then the actions and so on. So yes, we can, of course, I think we can. And that's one thing I also highlighted in my another of my articles, that the game design can kind of take into account these styles. And of course, because style is always restricted by the design of the game, then the designers can also guide players into certain styles or certain variations of styles. So yes, in that regard, yeah, we can, of course, but I think then appreciating the game object in this sense is quite different than appreciating what it feels like to interact with that object. So those are, I think, in that sense, separate. We can't imagine, I don't know, like if we would look at the notes of a composition of a classical music, could we really appreciate how it feels like to play it just by looking at the notes? I don't know. So that's maybe kind of a parallel, although a bit different question, but still, I think that also by just looking at the game object, like how it works, we cannot really know how it feels like to play it. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Okay. All right. I think given our timeline and speakers having a little bit of a crush timeline, round of
yes,
applause. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Great. And we have a slight change in our schedule just because timelines are what they are. So we will have Sophie and Louisa presenting next. So whenever you two are ready, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us. I just wanted to say a couple of words before Louisa starts with the presentation. Yeah, I'm Sophie and I came here with Louisa. We are both artists. I work with visual art, sound, and participatory media, and LARP. And I wanted to bring this project here today because it's a LARP that was only designed to be played in the art context. So I thought maybe this is interesting. And before we start, I wanted to say that it was really great to have Jason Cox beforehand because your article, Jason, about documenting LARP as an experience was actually a great inspiration for this design, especially the notion of souvenirs of an alternative reality. In our case, these are radio shows. But yeah, you will see it a bit. I would say, Louisa, you can start, and then I jump in later.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks, Sophie, for inviting me to join your talk. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit into what inspired the project that Sophie and me worked on together, which is called Exogen, which was a LARP that took place in an exhibition setting over the course of 2 months. So I also have some slides I'm going to try to share. Can people see this?
Yep.
Okay. Also now?
Yeah.
In full screen? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so my own practice is I'm working mostly with experimental location-based games. I started to work more with interactive fiction and text adventures, but then during lockdown, I got really inspired to try to do games outside of the screen and more using the city as a play field. So I was inspired by geocaching, and I created some games that work with web apps that lead you to coordinates where you then find different artifacts of the game that can then bring like a storyline forward. So this is maybe less as a LARP and more as it's more like location-based game format. And I was really curious to kind of see how far you can really create like an alternate reality in a real public space. And I was also curious about how you can use things like geocaching in a way to kind of break through the behavioral scripts that are present in public space, because we usually behave in very rigid ways. Like you're always trying to move from A to B very fast, be productive or go to a bar, but like to really be present and be in a playful or explorative mindset in public space. It doesn't happen so much as adults, unfortunately. And yeah, so I'm also curious. I was curious to see what kind of technologies are in place in public space that create these invisible borders that we might consciously perceive or subconsciously perceive. And so I started to research sensor networks and LoRa, long-range radio. And I used this to create my master project, which was called 868 megahertz, which was an app that leads you to different locations in the city where you unlock audio logs of a sleepwalker. This is really difficult to explain so quickly, but yeah, so I was researching these different technologies, and I eventually came across these center light poles, which are multifunctional light poles that are implemented in Rotterdam, where I'm based. And this was kind of leading into this exhibition concept that I curated in Rotterdam at Showroom Mama. And the idea was that you're kind of stepping into a public space, which is really heavily dominated by technology. So there was these smart light poles that would give information about these different artworks that I curated by different artists. And central in the exhibition was a game server, and that game server was connecting these different cybernetic installations that were supposed to kind of mimic the functions of a smart city, but it was also hosting a web app that was then central to the LARP. It's a little bit difficult to explain so fast, but yeah, and the web app was inspired by this smart traveling app that used to be called Ensre de Fiets, like that is still called Ensre de Fiets, and basically it's a smart traveling app that's connected to the light poles of the city. So if you have the app on your phone, and you're on your way home, the light poles will actually turn green for you faster because it knows where you are and it's connected to the light poles. So we used this idea and thought, how can we kind of gamify this app in the LARP context to kind of criticize it and reimagine it. And maybe, yeah, I'm gonna hand it over to Sophie to explain a little bit how we then turned this into a LARP that extended the story world of the exhibition.
Thank you, Louisa. I'm gonna
I need
share.
to stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna talk about the LARP that we did for this exhibition. So yeah, as Louisa said, this was all about smart cities. The exhibition was in 2023, and at this point, Rotterdam was planning to become a smart city in 2025. So our LARP was also set in 2025 in a fictional scenario in which Rotterdam had already become this smart city. No, actually, a couple of years later, a couple of years after 2025, Rotterdam was already a smart city, and we had this fictional company, Exogen, that was managing the whole data that the city was collecting. Yeah, so the goal of the LARP was to bring the themes of the exhibition outside of the gallery walls, educate players on smart city technology, engage players and imagine what the city of the future could look like, and encourage players and yeah, to engage in new technology also subversively and facilitate urban play. This is how the app looked like that Louisa designed for the game. And basically, you log in as a citizen and you get tracked the whole day. And the more you get tracked and give your data to the city, the more ether credits you earn. And obviously, every citizen wants to have a lot of ether credits because then you get all kinds of benefits like free parking or whatever. I think it's we know this from many other apps. What is special about that is that you can also, as a citizen, upload your own tips and trails in the app. And if other citizens use your tips or trails, you can earn also ether credits. So citizens are encouraged to earn by getting the attention of other citizens. So this is the fictional world in which we were playing, and the players themselves were a group, an underground radio collective, which was also called 868 megahertz. And each player, so the idea was that we wanted to form a temporary collective, even though it was in the LARP, and wanted this collective to collectively engage in a technology. We chose radio in that case. I'm a radio maker myself. Even though radio became big as an oppressive technology, it has also a big history of hosting disobedient voices. So we thought it would be a good way to make players use technology subversively. And it was also a great storytelling medium because it made people come together around a radio station, take microphones, share stories. And it was also the way to document the story in the LARP and bring it back to the exhibition. So through the radio, we would share the intro of the stories throughout this 2 months in which the LARP was happening, and for concentrated sessions. We would produce radio shows that would be streamed. Oh, actually, yeah, here. This is a screenshot of the radio station. So people also outside of the game could tune in, and especially in the exhibition, it's inside the exhibition, people could listen back to the radio show. And it was also a way to get new players throughout the 8 weeks onto the story. So that was the basic setting, but that was not the main story. There was a whole different story going on. So as I said, we had like 4 meetings in which we played. Each of the meetings, a meeting was structured as like a normal meeting of this collective. We would meet, share stories of what happened in the city, and make our radio shows. But the most important thing is that one of the founding members of the collective never showed up to the first meeting, and she just left an audio message in which she was explaining that she had to hide and go underground, and it was really unclear. But she left trails in the Exogen app for the players to get more information. So in the end, the meetings ended up us coming together, doing our radio shows, but also using the app and having riddles to solve, in which we get more hints and puzzle together the story of what happened to the missing member. This is another photo of the meeting. Throughout the different meetings of the collectives, there was also a manifesto happening, and new players joined throughout the game. So it was really like a collective that was slowly forming. And the different meetings, we hosted all the different meetings in underground art locations in Rotterdam to also make players, not only like play people from the underground, but also be inside of these spaces and engage with like real locations. Except of the last meeting, or the end of the story, that was then hosted again by a bigger art institution, which was the Het Nieuw Institute, the Museum for Design and Architecture and Digital Culture. And inside the Digital Culture Lab, which looks a bit like a spaceship, we could host the last session that was the headquarters of the Exogen company. The whole story ended quite dramatically. Players found out in the end that the leader of their collective that went missing actually never really existed, and was from the beginning on a fabricated AI voice created by Exogen to make them be busy with the app. And there was also an experiment going on with implementing fake memories inside of citizens, and they were all the testing subjects. It was a bit of a dramatic and cliche ending, but I think what was interesting here is that we never really planned the end for the story. We started the lab quite open, and throughout the different sessions, informed by the rumors and conspiracy theories that players brought into the game, the ending was kind of formed. Yeah, that's it about the game. Let me know if you have questions.
Great, thank you so much. Yep.
Or maybe I forgot something, Luisa, I don't know.
I think we can talk about it for 2 hours probably if we want to say everything. So let's see what the questions are.
Cool. Yeah, so we have some time for some questions. Yeah, so kind of going off of the last talk and the question of kind of aesthetic play behaviors by your players, since you were very much artists engaged within game design and building this game with this kind of purpose, did you have any moments of beautiful play by your players or interactions of the players inhabiting of this game art space you made that felt very clearly to you to highlight this tension between artistic play of players and artistic game framing and making that you were engaged in when you built this project?
To me, I was thinking when Johan was explaining this thing about aesthetics of like game mechanics, that for us, like the technology was really in focus as a aesthetical choice as well. So there were a few players who were also kind of they had coming like from this hacking mindset, and then in some of the in one of the radio sessions they were kind of imagining what a QR code would be like a few years from now, and kind of really like imagining this different technology. And I felt like that was really in line with like the aesthetical choices for the technologies we were using, and also how we were talking about it. So aesthetics as in making like consistent choices with the technology and how it's presented, and then the players taking that on and like even growing it. I think that was like a really funny moment. Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I don't know if Sophie, you have also anything that you remember?
No, yeah, I also had to think of exactly these moments. I think in the beginning we like specifically targeted people coming from either hacking community or urban design communities, because we thought these are like topics that we are addressing in our game, and we thought it would be interesting to have conversations with people that are thinking about these things through the game. And it really worked. However, the urban design people, they didn't really stay engaged. And it was more the technology people in the end. But yeah, it was really beautiful how the game could then like, inform conversations differently between these people.
Maybe you mentioned this already, but how many players were in this game? How long did this game play for?
Yeah, it ran for in total 2 months, and it had space for 35 players, but they were not all there at the same time. So per session, it was something between sometimes like 15 and sometimes more like 6, 7.
Yeah, also the challenge was kind of to make the sessions independent from each other, that people could jump in at any point, because the exhibition was supposed to be the entry point, so that people who could come into the exhibition at any point, they would know there's like a next session that they can join. So it was a little bit, like, okay, we have this amount of players that can come and they could sign up with us. But there was like a core player group, I think of maybe like around 5 people, and then different people dropped in and out.
I have a question. It's okay. Hello.
Yeah, please.
Just maybe also mention, but in terms of like context of creation as a game, and you said it wasn't for the Rotterdam Smart context of framework of the city. So did you collaborate with the city itself? Like, was it any framework which supported this urban implementation of the game?
Yeah, this is actually really interesting, Luisa.
Yeah, so not initially. We did like reach out to the municipality if they want to give us some of the like center light poles to play with, which didn't happen. But eventually, so they didn't get back to us. We actually messaged them, like the smart city department, but eventually there was actually people from that department going to the exhibition, and then they messaged us afterwards and they said they want to talk. And yeah, because we were also like, we were kind of making like fake municipality logos in the exhibition and kind of pretending some of the like announcements were from this like fake municipality and stuff. And there was actually someone who is working on the project of the smart trash cans in Rotterdam. They came to the exhibition, and it was like, and one of the installations was about smart trash cans, and he felt apparently like personally addressed. So I also met with him and I talked about it with him. So there was a few meetings, and that's actually how I got to be in contact with the municipality and research more of the smart technology. And now we are in contact to organize a conference together to talk about how to make like technology in public space more community centered and more playful, instead of like basically like a helicopter parent kind of approach. And yeah, that's nice.
Nice. Yes, sounds great. But originally it was an independent project, right? So it just came in response to the agenda city came from, but it was your own independent project.
Yeah, exactly. I think the main problem was also that if you don't know something, then it kind of you kind of create this dystopian scenarios because you fill in what you don't know. And this is also kind of what happened, I think, with the dialogues with the municipality. Some things became also more clear of how it actually works. Yeah, but yeah, that was after the exhibition.
Yeah, in the research process, we were just reading how like cities that want to become smart cities have like a digital twin copy of their city, like virtually, and it's almost like a 3D virtual control center where you can see like all the data, and we use this in our game like fictionally as something that is like, oh, so insane and scary. And afterwards they actually, like when they approached Louisa actually got access to the actual digital twin of the city. So
Oh,
we
wow.
kind of like imagined it in the game, but then it really existed, and yeah, she could see it.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. That's our time. Round of applause. We have our final speaker next. So Karina, whenever you're ready.
Just give me a second. Okay, hello. If you cannot hear me, just tell me.
No, it's all good.
My name is Corinne Mazzoli. I come from Italy, from Bicocca University. I am an artist myself, but I'm not going to talk about my artistic work. I am going to speak about a work by another artist, and his name is Danilo Correale, and the project is called The Game, a three-sided football match. So this project was done in between 2013 and 2014, and it involved, it was a collaboration with three big companies in Italy. Colle Vilca, it's a company making shaping crystals. PR Industrial is dedicated to power supply, and then Trigano SPA is producing motorhomes and caravans. So what Danilo did was to bring the employees of those companies, together, and for a long period of time, for 6 months, he trained them, and he helped them to shape their identities, to choose their uniforms and colors, and then he trained them to be to engage in a three-sided football match. So the project, the game, is not a simple game. It's just, it was for Danilo an excuse to bring back to life an idea of self-organization, and as well the idea of playing outside patterns. So questions our roles in society and at work and in daily life. So I decided to speak about this project because it is a relational project. It is about people. It is not only about art and games. It is mostly about humans. And somehow I see some tangencies with role play and LARPs in the making of it. In this project, soccer was identified as a form to experiment with different models of self-organization, and specifically here, Danilo decided for the three-sided football that was first invented by Esger Jorn. I am sorry, Danish people, for my mispronunciation. As you know, he was major artist in situationism, and as you probably know, situationism emerged as an agglomeration of several avant-garde movements with the shared goal of rethinking the post-World War II for this society where people were living in a like sterile and boring environments. So art was taken as a tool to create collective emancipation and go against the capitalist subjugation. So basically, Jorn was moving in this situation, and he was very much in line with this approach and got interested in topology as the science of metamorphosis. And right after, he started discussing his idea of triolectic, and I'm quoting him, as the doctrine about the necessity and the sufficiency of three complementary pieces of information to describe what we shall call a situation. So what Jorn did was to came up with a proposal of the three-sided football to explain triolectic in an easier way, in a practical way. And it is a game where three teams are playing against each others, and on an hexagonal pitch with three goals, basically. So the idea of a three-sided football is that it does not foster aggression or competitiveness. Unlike the two-sided football, the team is not keeping the record of the number of goals that they are scoring. They do keep count of the goal that they concede. So the team that concedes least goals is the one who wins at the end. The idea is that when the defense is penetrated by two opposing teams, one has to deal with disadvantage. So they have to create discord among the other two teams, and they can do this by performing or by body language, persuasion, the ability of moving the ball, but also to manipulate the players somehow into a position where the other team would avoid attacking the defensive team and would help them out. So the three-sided football game is basically a game of skill, persuasion, and psychogeography. And this sentence is taken from the AAA, so the Association of Autonomous Astronauts, who organized several football matches as training in the 90s. So they were working together with the London Psychogeographic Association and with the Luther Bliss collective name. Those groups were very active. They played a lot of three-sided football, and they were actually promoting a class war in different ways, through actual serious protests, but also through with a certain degree of humor. So combining art, media pranks, and other type of actions. So what the point here is, when thinking about a system, what Jorn did was to think about this conceptual and agonistic system, and he wanted to give a possible alternative to dialectic, which was triolectic. The idea of what would happen if the contraposition between two subjects were broken by the introduction of a third element. And my question here is, what happens when an artist enters the space of a company, positioning themselves as a third party in a dichotomic relationship between employer and employees? And this is what happened in the game. So Danilo Correale decided to play outside of the dialectical pattern and created a platform to question the roles that the people had inside the corporate, inside the companies. And he created a constructive dialogue in between them and in between themselves and the company they were working for. So through constructive meetings, they created their own identities, as I said previously. Real Cristal decided to make this. You see the logos here. So they were based on Crystal Productions. So they decided to make this logo specifically working on what their factory is producing. Gladiatori was invented to recall the epic figure of the gladiators. And also it's a joke because tori means bulls. And also tori is the last suffix of the company products like generatori, generators, sollevatori, like lifters. And then Esuberanti 301, which is a name that it refers to the trait of the players, exuberant people, exuberance, but also to the precarious situation that they were experiencing in their company. So the people were at the beginning, the personnel was reduced from 500 to 301. So a lot of people were left home. They were laid off. In Italian, when you say laid off, you say in esubero. So somehow the name was given to recall all those people that were left home. And this is important in the situation because somehow it's proving how the game by Danilo Correale was an occasion to highlight social and political issues beyond the ludic aspect of the project. So Danilo entered the space. He worked closely with them. He had a caravan. They were meeting inside the caravan every day and discussing their identities, but also their political and social issues inside their companies. And there they spent half a year doing that. And there they found out what to do and how to behave during the match, the final match, which was not the main core of the game, of the project. The main core was the whole process of starting a discussion and then going through different paths of creating their identity and reaching the goal of the last game to be played together. So what was important as well in the game was the third half. So Danilo asked them to design the third half of the play the game as a creative time. So after playing the game, each team decided to showing off, making community, like it was a special moment where they gathered together and they made fun of themselves and they played in the field where they were playing football just previously. So somehow the game germinated from a community work. It was able to go over the event format and it was able to keep mark on all the participants. So it stayed with them even after the intervention by Danilo. So I'm closing with this. This was one of the banners displayed on the supporters stand, and it is a quote by Mayakovsky: "Art is not a mirror to hold up to society, but a hammer with which to shape it." And thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we have some time for some questions. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I have one. Hello, Corinne. Hello from London this time. Yeah. Yeah, also show a little bit, maybe like also more participants on this site. Yeah, just say hello from our class.
Hi.
thesis unit. Yeah, so we're discussing different aspects of game play, and I have a question about a typical three-player dilemma, or like problem actually, is the one where you mentioned the defenders and like supportive mood in a team, but in fact, why does it work this way, as we typically have two weaker players or team, in this case, allies against the stronger player? Why it's not a case in this game?
It is actually. But the point is that you don't play only by playing the ball, you play also by strategically persuading the other teams. So you talk to them as well. You can persuade them, you can ask them, or you can actually play along with them, because you are you need to be the one that has least goals in your side. So this is somehow becomes less competitive than a dichotomic or a normal two-sided football.
All right. Okay, that's an interesting observation.
In general, in this case, I took this project because the three-sided football has been played, and it's still going on now. There are tournaments all over the world, but in this specific, I wanted to show this specific project to show that it was not that important, the idea of playing football. It was more the idea of building up the entire structure to get there and have a moment together that showed them that actually they were able to work together to create a community and to bind inside a moment of difficulties. Of course, all those factories had issues with cut-offs in payments or in people. And this process of creating their own identity for the football team was a way of binding together more.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
When these groups of players are engaged in these like leagues and working together inside of it, if you know, how much do you feel like the concept or philosophy of trialectics does like kind of spread for them, where they see like other effects or insights in the larger philosophy outside of the zone of interaction?
So the Danilo did a documentary about this. So the artwork in the end is the entire process, but of course there is a film. And in the movie, when they are asked like, "Do you know what's going on?" the people in the audience are like, "I have no idea." And when they were discussing in the caravans, they didn't really understand completely the idea of a trialectic, and it took them a while to get through the notion of playing a three-sided football. But from what I can see from the video, the documentary, it's they enjoy very much this idea of talking and staying all together in an environment that's outside their working place, because of course it's always the caravan. So the caravan is moving from one factory to the other one as a portable office with Danilo inside, and then they get out of the office and have the time to stay there and discuss. So I think that at the beginning they didn't understand what's going on with this idea of trialectics, but somehow they managed to embrace it anyways.
Cool. Nice. Time for another question. Did you see anything? I don't know if you've dealt with players who played this game a lot, but do you see any like shifts in player relationships to the game as they get more used to how this three-sided football game works? Or have you seen any insights on that?
I've never spoken to anyone playing that in real life, so I have no idea. Or maybe I do, but they didn't tell me. So
Yeah, please.
Hi, Corine. Grazie for a really nice presentation. Really interesting game. I think what's really interesting for me is that, in a sense, even the gameplay is interesting, but also just the game as this site for other activities. That it, maybe that's even a thread running through the presentations today. That the gameplay then becomes leveraged in some aesthetic way, or in your case, a political sense. I'm interested because, you know, football or soccer is like such a popular sport in Italy and in Europe, and I was really interested that they have to make these identities for themselves, design a logo. And I guess I'm curious because the intention of the activity is so much about dethroning notions of capitalism. I'm curious that there is a kind of, uh, eh, I guess in sports, that there's always this danger of heading into what Frank Lance has called the toy fascism of sports, right? This kind of give yourself an identity that there's your team, there's the other team. So I'm curious in what way that identity formation was structured to kind of avoid that traps, or did it have some of it? Was it an interesting mix? I hope my question is clear.
Yes, I thank you so much for your question. In general, also like Danilo created also a book about this project, and there is an interesting article about the importance of soccer in social occasions, but also, like, Pierpaolo Pasolini spoke a lot about soccer as a ritual, and comparing it to art, because art as well is really combined with rituals. So for sure Danilo had knew this and had this was a starting point. At the same time, it is true what you say, but it is also true that soccer in many countries was something done grassroots. So, like, to take people off the streets. So you play football so you don't do drugs, or you don't go through criminality. So now we see football as something that's related to capitalism, to money, to the creation of like a national identity. But somehow it is not only that. There is also a backside of the coin where football is also a sport that has helped a lot of people to engage into group activities, and then also to create communities and to raise against what society was imposing them. And this is I can ask Danilo. Actually, I can share this with you, because it's online on the website of the company that produced the work. So, and there is a whole part about football that's extremely interesting to read, because yes, of course, what you say is completely correct, but it is not only dichotomical. Again, it's like you have a three side to see.
Right. Okay. One could apply trialectics to this question of, the intersecting forces and the identity of the players in the sport.
Thank you so much. So I didn't have time to go through many things. So
really interesting project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. That's our time for today. So another round of applause for Trina. Great. Thank you all to all of the speakers. I'll leave the chat open for the next little while. If you have any other final comments or questions, please feel free to use the chat and direct message people, be in contact. Thank you so much. We'll have our next research talk in November, on November 14th, on games and death. We have some really cool speakers for that. Thank you all so much, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.